Chosen one, something is happening inside you that may be easy to misunderstand. You may call it restlessness. You may think you are simply tired, distracted, or dissatisfied with the life you have built. You may wonder why the conversations that once entertained you now feel empty, why certain people exhaust you more quickly, or why achievements that once seemed important no longer create the same excitement. Nothing may be visibly wrong. You can still complete your responsibilities. You can answer messages, make plans, smile when people speak to you, and continue doing what is expected. From the outside, your life may look completely normal, yet somewhere beneath the surface, an old way of living is becoming impossible to maintain. That is the moment you must not ignore. The greatest leap in consciousness of this century may not arrive as a dramatic event that everybody notices at the same time. There may be no single morning when the entire world suddenly becomes wiser, kinder, or more awake. The leap may begin quietly inside ordinary people who notice that they can no longer live mechanically. It may begin inside you. You feel the pressure of a world that is moving faster than your mind and body can process. Information reaches you before you have time to understand the information that came before it. Every platform competes for your attention. Every headline demands an emotional response. Every person seems to have an opinion about how you should live, what you should fear, what you should desire, and who you should become. If you do not choose what shapes your attention, something else will choose for you. That is the hidden danger of this century. The greatest threat is not only that technology will change, systems will become unstable, or the world will become more complicated. The deeper threat is that you may spend your life reacting to forces you never consciously agreed to follow. You wake up and immediately reach for the phone. Before you have remembered your own priorities, you are already inside somebody else's story. You see another person's success and begin questioning your progress. You read something frightening and carry the fear into your day. You watch people arguing and feel pressure to choose a side before you have examined what is true. By the time you begin your own work, your attention has already been divided among dozens of people, problems, and possibilities. This happens so gradually that it can feel normal. That is why the leap begins with noticing. Noticing is more powerful than it appears because most unconscious patterns depend on remaining invisible. A habit can control you for years as long as you believe it is simply part of your personality. A fear can direct your decisions as long as you continue calling it intuition. A wound can shape your relationships as long as you believe every emotional reaction is revealing the truth about the person in front of you. The moment you notice the pattern, a small space appears between what happens and how you respond. That space is the beginning of freedom. You may still feel the fear, but you can ask whether it contains new information or whether it is repeating an old story. You may still become angry, but you can wait before turning the emotion into words that create a larger problem. You may still want approval, but you can recognize when the desire to be accepted is making you betray something you already know. This is consciousness in practical form. It is not about pretending to feel peaceful all the time. It is not about creating a spiritual identity that makes you feel superior to people who live differently. It is the ability to see what is happening inside you while it is happening and to choose whether you will continue the same response. Many people will miss this leap because they expect awakening to look extraordinary. They imagine visions, perfect peace, or a sudden moment when every question receives an answer. When that experience does not occur, they assume nothing important is happening. Meanwhile, the real transformation may already be appearing through discomfort. You become tired of superficial conversations. You notice how often people speak without listening. You feel more sensitive to environments filled with constant noise, conflict, or emotional performance. You realize that some of your goals were chosen because they looked impressive rather than because they created a life you wanted to live. These realizations can feel like loss. The identity that helped you survive may no longer fit, but the new identity has not fully formed. You know what you are becoming less willing to tolerate, yet you do not always know what should replace it. This is one of the most confusing parts of a consciousness shift. You may feel disconnected from people you once understood. You may become less interested in activities that previously gave your life structure. You might question decisions, relationships, and beliefs that once seemed permanent. Do not rush to label yourself as broken. You may be experiencing the tension between an old identity and a wider level of awareness. The old identity was not created to harm you. It developed in response to what you experienced. Perhaps you became agreeable because conflict once felt unsafe. You learned to study other people's moods so you could avoid becoming a target. You became useful because being needed felt more secure than simply being loved. You learned to hide ambition because visibility attracted criticism. These strategies may have protected you, but something that protected you in one stage can restrict you in another. The person who learned to avoid conflict may later struggle to communicate a necessary boundary. The person who found safety by being useful may become exhausted by relationships in which their value depends on endless giving. The person who learned to hide may feel invisible and wonder why opportunities never arrive. The old identity is not your enemy. It is a version of you that learned how to survive with the awareness and resources available at the time. The leap begins when you can thank that version without allowing it to make every future decision. You can recognize that pleasing people once protected you and still decide that honesty is now more important than approval. You can understand why you fear visibility and still allow your work to be seen. You can respect the person you had to become without assuming you must remain that person forever. This is the second stage of the leap. First, you notice where your attention is going. Then you begin questioning the identity that keeps sending it there. Why does one person's silence control your mood? Why does criticism from a stranger feel more powerful than encouragement from people who know your work? Why do you continue returning to situations that exhaust you? Why do you feel guilty whenever you protect your time? The answer is often connected to the identity you have been trying to maintain. Perhaps you need to be seen as kind, so you say yes when your body is asking you to stop. Perhaps you need to be seen as strong, so you refuse to ask for support. Perhaps you need to believe that a relationship was destined, because admitting that it is unhealthy would force you to grieve the future you imagined. These identities are not always obvious. They can appear as values. Loyalty can become an excuse for staying in a pattern that has no mutual responsibility. Patience can become an excuse for avoiding a decision. Spiritual faith can become an excuse for refusing to examine reality. Strength can become an excuse for never resting. The leap in consciousness asks you to separate the value from the pattern built around it. You can remain loyal without abandoning yourself. You can have faith without ignoring evidence. You can be patient without waiting forever. You can be strong enough to admit that something hurts. This is not a rejection of who you are. It is an expansion of what your values are allowed to mean. The century you are living through will test this expansion constantly. Technology will continue becoming faster. More information will become available. More people will compete for visibility. The world may offer endless ways to improve yourself while quietly teaching you that you are never enough. You will be encouraged to measure your value through numbers. How many people noticed you? How much did you earn? How quickly did you grow? How attractive, productive, informed, or influential do you appear? There is nothing wrong with progress or achievement. The danger begins when the measurement replaces the life. You may build an impressive image while losing contact with the person living behind it. You may achieve the goal and discover that the achievement cannot answer the question that motivated you to pursue it. Am I finally worthy? No external result can permanently answer a question that must be examined internally. Success can create opportunity. It can provide stability, freedom, and influence. But if you use success to escape a belief that you are not enough, every achievement will need to be followed by another one. The relief will be temporary because the old identity remains in control. The leap is not asking you to abandon ambition. It is asking you to stop using ambition as a way to avoid yourself. You can want more without treating the present version of you as a failure. You can build something meaningful without believing the result will finally make you acceptable. You can improve your life from self-respect rather than self-rejection. That change in motivation affects everything. When you act from self-rejection, rest feels dangerous. You believe slowing down will reveal that you are falling behind. You compare constantly because another person's success seems to reduce the value of your own progress. When you act from self-respect, you can work seriously without turning every result into a judgment of your identity. You can fail, learn, and continue. You can receive criticism without allowing it to erase everything you know. You can succeed without becoming addicted to the reaction. This is the internal stability the modern world rarely teaches. The world teaches you how to capture attention. Consciousness teaches you how to protect it. Your attention is not only what you look at. It is the energy through which your life becomes organized. Whatever repeatedly receives your attention begins gaining influence over your emotions, beliefs, and decisions. If you constantly focus on what you lack, the mind becomes trained to overlook what is available. If you repeatedly revisit a betrayal, the past remains active in the present even when the person is no longer there. If you spend hours consuming fear, your body may begin preparing for threats that are not directly in front of you. This does not mean you can control reality by thinking positively. Difficult situations remain real. Injustice, loss, illness, and uncertainty do not disappear because you changed your focus. The deeper truth is that attention determines how much of your life is given to each reality. You may not control what happened, but you can begin deciding whether it receives another year of mental rehearsal. You may not control what another person thinks, but you can decide whether their opinion becomes the center of your identity. You may not control the speed of the world, but you can create moments in which your nervous system is not required to follow that speed. This is why silence may begin feeling more important to you. Not because you are rejecting the world, but because you need enough distance to hear what remains when the noise is removed. In silence, you may discover that some desires were created by comparison. You may realize that you do not actually want the life you have been trying to prove you can achieve. You may feel grief for time spent pursuing approval. You may notice that the decision you called confusing becomes clearer when other people's reactions are no longer in the room. This can be uncomfortable. Noise keeps certain truths hidden. Constant stimulation prevents you from hearing the sentence that might require change. I am not happy in this relationship. I am exhausted by the role I play in my family. I have been delaying the work because I am afraid to be judged. I do not believe what I keep pretending to believe. Consciousness reveals what is present. It does not guarantee that you will enjoy what you see. That is why many people turn awakening into fantasy. They want spiritual ideas that make them feel elevated without requiring them to examine the ordinary ways they abandon themselves. They speak about energy while continuing relationships that depend on manipulation. They speak about manifestation while avoiding practical responsibility. They speak about divine timing while using timing as a reason never to act. The real leap is less dramatic and more demanding. It appears when you pause before repeating the pattern. It appears when you communicate honestly instead of using silence as punishment. It appears when you examine the numbers rather than hoping financial pressure will solve itself. It appears when you release work before perfection gives you permission. It appears when you admit that understanding someone's pain does not require accepting the harm they continue creating. Consciousness becomes real through participation. This is the third stage. Attention allows you to see. Identity reveals what has been choosing for you. Participation is where the new awareness becomes a different life. Without participation, awakening remains an idea you enjoy thinking about. You may understand every pattern and continue behaving exactly the same way. You can identify your wound, explain your attachment style, describe your triggers, and still return to the same person every time loneliness becomes strong. Knowledge does not automatically produce transformation. A person changes when awareness reaches behavior. This is why one honest action can be more important than hours of spiritual content. You recognize that a conversation repeatedly becomes harmful, so you reduce access. You notice that checking the phone destroys your concentration, so you protect the first hour of the day. You admit that resentment is growing because you never communicate limits, so you say no once without writing an entire defense. The action may seem small, but it changes your relationship with yourself. You are no longer only the person who knows. You become the person who responds to what they know. That creates self-trust. Many people believe self-trust means believing that every decision will be correct. It does not. Self-trust means knowing that if a decision creates an unexpected result, you will not abandon yourself. You can review what happened. You can change direction. You can admit that you were wrong without turning the mistake into a permanent identity. You can ask for help. You can begin again with more information. When you trust your ability to respond, uncertainty becomes less controlling. You no longer need a guarantee before taking the first step. This may be one of the greatest shifts available to people in this century, the movement from needing external certainty to developing internal responsiveness. The world may remain unpredictable. Technology may change the nature of work. Relationships may develop through new forms. Institutions you trusted may become unstable. You may not be able to predict everything that will happen, but you can become more conscious of how you meet what happens. This is not passive acceptance. It is an active form of intelligence. When fear spreads, you ask whether the information is reliable before allowing the emotion to organize your behavior. When opportunity appears, you examine whether excitement is removing your judgment. When somebody criticizes you, you separate useful information from the wound activated by the delivery. When you fail, you look for the lesson instead of creating an identity around the failure. The leap is not from human to superhuman. It is from unconscious reaction to conscious participation. You remain human. You still experience jealousy, fear, anger, desire, and uncertainty. Awakening does not remove the emotional system. It changes your relationship with it. Instead of saying, "I am afraid, therefore I must stop," you begin saying, "Fear is present. What is it responding to?" Sometimes fear will reveal a real risk. Sometimes it will reveal that the next step is unfamiliar. The feeling alone cannot make the distinction. Awareness investigates. Instead of saying, "I am angry, therefore the other person must be wrong," you ask what boundary, expectation, or old wound is involved. The anger may contain important information. It may also be carrying pain from a different situation. Awareness allows complexity. The unconscious mind wants immediate certainty: good person or bad person, success or failure, destiny or mistake. The conscious mind can remain present while more information becomes available. This is especially important in relationships. You may have spent years interpreting intensity as love. A person's inconsistency kept you thinking about them, so the connection felt powerful. Their return created relief, and the relief was mistaken for proof that the relationship was special. Consciousness asks what the relationship produces over time. Do you become more honest or more afraid to speak? Do you feel supported or constantly responsible for maintaining closeness? Can both people repair conflict, or does one person repeatedly disappear while the other chases? A connection can feel deep and still be unhealthy. A calm relationship can feel unfamiliar and still be meaningful. When the nervous system has become accustomed to chaos, peace may initially feel empty. The leap requires enough awareness to remain with the unfamiliar experience before returning to the pattern you recognize. This applies to work as well. You may be addicted to urgency because urgency gives you a temporary sense of importance. You delay a task until pressure becomes intense, then complete it in a state of panic. The result reinforces the belief that you perform best under pressure. In reality, you may have trained yourself to require stress before acting. A conscious approach may feel less dramatic. You begin earlier. You work for a defined period. You stop before exhaustion. You return the next day. This method may not create the same emotional intensity, but it can create something urgency rarely provides: consistency. The leap of this century may involve learning to stop confusing stimulation with aliveness. More noise does not always create more meaning. More information does not always create more understanding. More connection does not always create intimacy. You can interact with hundreds of people and remain unknown. You can consume endless content about personal growth and continue avoiding one necessary conversation. The amount is not the transformation. The quality of attention is. Ask yourself where your attention has been living. Has it been trapped in the past, trying to rewrite something that cannot be changed? Has it been sent into the future, preparing constantly for disasters that may never happen? Has it been scattered across comparison, outrage, and other people's expectations? You do not need to reclaim everything today. Choose one place where your attention is repeatedly leaving you. Perhaps you check a person's activity even though the information never creates peace. Perhaps you read news late at night and carry the fear into sleep. Maybe you open multiple platforms whenever the work becomes difficult. Do not judge yourself. Examine what the habit provides. Does it reduce uncertainty? Does it help you avoid boredom? Does it protect you from the possibility of trying and failing? A habit continues because it offers a reward even when the long-term cost is high. Consciousness identifies both. You cannot replace a habit effectively while pretending it gives you nothing. If checking a person's activity gives temporary relief, you need another way to tolerate uncertainty. If distraction protects you from difficult work, the task may need to be made smaller and clearer. If constant information gives you a sense of control, you may need to practice allowing some questions to remain unanswered. The leap is compassionate. It does not attack the pattern. It understands the function and develops a wiser response. This is how identity begins updating. You stop saying, "I am undisciplined." You say, "I have trained myself to escape discomfort quickly." The second statement contains a possibility for change. You stop saying, "I always choose the wrong people." You ask, "What qualities feel familiar to me, and why have I interpreted familiarity as safety?" You stop saying, "I have no confidence." You ask, "What evidence would help me trust myself more?" Language matters because it can turn a temporary pattern into a permanent identity. The conscious mind becomes careful about the stories it repeats, not because words magically control everything, but because repeated descriptions influence what you believe is possible. If you call yourself broken long enough, every difficulty becomes confirmation. If you call yourself someone who is learning, difficulty can become information. This is not false positivity, it is accuracy. You are not a finished object. You are a living process capable of awareness, adjustment, and growth. That may be the responsibility hidden inside the idea of being chosen. You are not chosen because you are more important than other people. You are chosen when you respond to the call to become more conscious of how you participate in life. The title should not become another identity used to feel superior. The chosen one is not the person who believes they have special access to truth while everybody else remains asleep. The chosen one is the person willing to become responsible for what they can now see. Once you recognize a pattern, you cannot continue blaming unconsciousness forever. You may repeat it. Growth is rarely perfect, but you now have a responsibility to notice sooner and return more quickly. That return is part of awakening. You will lose attention. You will react emotionally. You will seek approval. You may contact the person, abandon the boundary, or postpone the work. Do not turn the mistake into proof that nothing changed. Consciousness is not never falling asleep. It is recognizing sleep. Perhaps an old pattern once controlled you for 3 years. Now it controls you for 3 months. Later, 3 days. Eventually, you notice the urge before acting. This is progress. It may not feel dramatic enough to impress anyone, but it changes the actual structure of your life. The world may reward visible transformation. Consciousness often grows through private corrections nobody sees. You apologize, you pause, you return to the work, you stop explaining. You allow another person to be disappointed. You choose not to feed the thought for another hour. These moments build coherence. Coherence means your thoughts, values, words, and actions begin moving in a similar direction. You say peace matters, and you stop repeatedly inviting chaos into your private life. You say the project matters, and you give it protected time. You say honesty matters, and you stop agreeing to arrangements you secretly resent. This alignment creates an inner stability that performance cannot provide. You do not need to become perfectly coherent. You need to notice where the contradiction is costing you the most. Perhaps you want love while remaining attached to someone who can offer only uncertainty. You want freedom while organizing every decision around approval. You want spiritual clarity while consuming noise from the moment you wake until the moment you sleep. Choose one contradiction, then choose one action that reduces it. One honest action is more powerful than 1,000 ideas about awakening. Perhaps the action is 1 hour without your phone. One boundary stated without a long explanation. One piece of work completed and released. One apology offered because pride has delayed it. One decision to stop checking on someone who already made their position clear. Do not choose 10 actions. Overwhelming yourself can become another way of avoiding change. Choose one that can be completed. Let your nervous system experience what it feels like to act according to what you know. This is how consciousness enters the ordinary. The greatest leap of this century will not be created only through books, videos, teachers, or technology. These things can provide language and direction, but the leap becomes real inside the moment a human being decides not to repeat inherited pain. A parent pauses before speaking to a child in the same damaging way they were spoken to. A person leaves a relationship without turning the pain into hatred. A leader receives power and chooses not to humiliate people with less authority. Someone recognizes fear spreading online and refuses to pass it forward without checking whether it is true. These choices affect more than the individual. Your awareness changes how you speak. Your speech changes the emotional environment around you. That environment affects what other people believe is possible. You do not need to save the entire world. You participate by improving the quality of consciousness you bring into the part of the world you touch. How do you listen when someone disagrees? How do you behave when nobody is watching? What do you do with power? How do you respond when your pride is injured? Do you use pain as permission to create pain, or can the pattern end with you? These are not small questions, they are the practical foundation of a more conscious century. The external world will not become peaceful before you practice peace. That does not mean remaining silent in the presence of injustice. Conscious peace can be direct, courageous, and unwilling to cooperate with harm. Peace is not passivity. It is the ability to act without becoming completely possessed by hatred. You can oppose something without allowing it to turn you into another version of what you oppose. This is difficult. That is why consciousness is a practice rather than a permanent emotional state. The world will continue offering reasons to react. The leap is your increasing ability to choose which reactions deserve expression and which ones need examination first. Before this message ends, take one slow breath, not because one breath will solve your life, because it demonstrates something important. The world can continue moving while you pause. A notification can remain unanswered. A thought can appear without receiving immediate obedience. A feeling can move through your body while you observe it. Notice the fact that you can see your thoughts. If you can observe a thought, then the thought is an experience you are having. It is not the complete definition of who you are. This does not remove its power immediately, but it changes your relationship with it. You can say, "The thought that I will fail is present." That is different from saying, "I will fail." You can say, "The fear of abandonment is active." That is different from saying, "This person is definitely leaving." The language creates space for investigation. Inside that space, the leap continues. Chosen one, if this message is reaching you at the right moment, write asterisk, "I choose the leap in consciousness" in the comments. Do not write it as a claim that you are more awakened than others. Write it as a commitment to become more responsible for your attention, identity, and participation. You are choosing to notice where your attention is being taken. You are choosing to question identities that were built for survival, but no longer serve your future. You are choosing to let awareness influence your next real action. That is enough for today. You do not have to become a new person overnight. The desire for immediate transformation can become another form of impatience. You may feel inspired, create an impossible plan, and then attack yourself when ordinary life returns. Allow consciousness to grow through repetition. You notice, you choose, you forget, you notice again. Each return strengthens the path. The greatest leap in consciousness of this century may not be something you witness from a distance. It may be the movement from being controlled by the age to becoming conscious within it. From allowing every signal to capture you to becoming a guardian of your attention. From living through inherited fear to examining what you truly believe. From waiting to be chosen to choosing how you will show up. From treating pain as identity to treating it as something that can be understood, healed, and transformed. If you ignore this movement, you may still live a busy and successful life. You may achieve things, receive recognition, and appear completely functional, but you may miss the internal revolution. You may spend years building a life that does not feel like yours because you never stopped long enough to ask who was making the decisions. Do not wait for the world to become quieter. It may not. Learn to create enough quiet inside yourself to hear what noise cannot tell you. Do not wait until fear disappears. Learn to act responsibly while fear is present. Do not wait for every person to understand you. Learn the difference between useful feedback and approval you have been conditioned to need. Do not wait for perfect spiritual certainty. Begin with the truth you can already see. Where are you abandoning your attention? Which identity are you protecting? What is one action that would make your life more coherent today? Let those questions remain with you. Do not rush to produce impressive answers. The honest answer may be simple. Turn off the phone, tell the truth, complete the page, leave the conversation, ask for help, rest before deciding, stop feeding the fear. The sacred does not always arrive through extraordinary experiences. Sometimes it waits inside the quality of your next ordinary choice. That is where the leap enters your life. The century may continue becoming faster, louder, and more uncertain. Let it. You do not need to match its unconscious speed. You can move with awareness. The world may multiply information. You can deepen understanding. People may become more reactive. You can practice the pause. The old identity may continue asking for control. You can listen without giving it permanent authority. The leap begins the moment you notice what has been shaping you without permission. It grows when you stop calling the pattern your personality. It becomes real when your next action reflects what you now understand. If you noticed even one thing today, then you have not missed the leap. Something has already begun.